The Inquisition did not burn atheists. Think about it. Not those who openly said there is no God. There were only a few of them, and they were looked at roughly like people with a mental disorder. No, the Inquisition was after its own people, for Christians, for people who were baptized in childhood, went to the same church, and prayed to the same God, but somewhere along the way they took a wrong turn. The Cathars, the Waldenses, Albigenses, the Hussites. These are not Gentiles from foreign lands. They are former parishioners. And here's a question worth asking yourself right now. Why is the system always more afraid of a traitor from the inside than an enemy from the outside? This is not a religious issue. More precisely, not only religious. It's a question of power and loyalty, about how any system, religious, political, ideological, corporate, reacts to a person who knew the rules from the inside and deliberately abandoned them. Why is a traitor more dangerous than an enemy? Why is the apostate a special category for which all cultures have a special, most severe punishment? Why does the word traitor sound worse in the language of almost any nation than enemy? That's the central question of this video. What makes a friend who's gone so dangerous? Most people will say something like, well, of course, the traitor knows your weaknesses. He knows the secrets. He's already inside. And that's generally true, but it's not the whole truth. And that's where the fun begins. Because if it's just about information, an atheist can also study theology thoroughly. An enemy scout can know your secrets as well as a defector. A competitor in the market can hire former employees and get all your data. But for some reason, it is the heretic, it is the defector, it is the friend who defected that causes a special, almost irrational rage. So it's not just about information.
The real reason for the fear of a heretic is not that he knows your secrets. The point is that he proves that the system is selectable. This is the key. This is fundamentally different. As long as an atheist stands outside and says there is no God, you can dismiss it. He's different. He never understood. He's a stranger. He can be pitied, condemned, ignored. But when there is a person standing next to you who has walked the same path as you, he prayed with the same words, I read the same texts, and then I looked at all this and said, no, wait. He's doing something much more dangerous. He demonstrates that there is a way out, that an alternative is possible. The atheist says, your world is not real. The heretic says, your world can be redefined. Do you feel the difference? The first is an abstract threat. The second is a living example. And a living example is always more dangerous than an abstract argument. There is a concept in psychology called cognitive dissonance. Roughly speaking, this is a condition when two contradictory beliefs live in your head at the same time, and this causes discomfort. When there is a heretic next to you, a person who did the same thing as you and came to a different conclusion, he activates this dissonance automatically. You can't ignore him because he looks too much like you. And that's where the brain does a very curious thing. Instead of thinking, or maybe he's right, it triggers a defense mechanism. This person should be declared bad, not just deluded, but bad, morally defective. Because that's the only way to keep your own identity intact. An atheist, he just didn't get it. A heretic, he betrayed. And traitors are not persuaded, they are punished. And the more strongly the system clings to its infallibility, the harsher it reacts to those who show that there is no infallibility. The year is 1517. Martin Luther nails his 95 Theses to the door of the castle church in Wittenberg. He's not an atheist, he's a monk, a Catholic priest, a man who dedicated his life to God and the Church. And that's why Rome reacts with such fury. If Luther had been a pagan philosopher from Turkey, he would simply have been ignored. But he was inside. He spoke the language of theology. He quoted the scriptures. He knew the mechanism, and he publicly explained how it worked. He was declared a heretic, excommunicated from the church, and an imperial decree was issued against him, the Edict of Worms, which effectively outlawed him. Anyone could have killed him without legal consequences. But do you know what the most revealing thing is? His words are spreading across Europe faster than any papal bull, because people see that he's one of us, and that means it's possible. Luther wasn't dangerous by what he said, and the fact that he was a living proof. You can doubt the system and survive. Look at the corporate world. When an employee of a large company leaves for a competitor, it is unpleasant but tolerable. But when a former top manager writes a book about how the company works from the inside, when an insider gives an interview and explains the mechanisms, this is where the real war begins. Think of Edward Snowden. From the state's point of view, he didn't just leak classified information, he did something much worse. He explained. He translated the technical and bureaucratic language of surveillance into human language. He showed his fellow citizens, this is how it works. That's how you're being controlled.
And the reaction? The charge of treason. The hardest article. Not for spying for the enemy, but for telling his own people. They still can't forgive him. Not because he caused military damage. It's because he gave people the opportunity to make an informed decision. And this is a real nightmare for any control system. Let's take any closed system with a rigid ideology. Religious sects, totalitarian states, radical movements. One of their most common traits is a special attitude towards those who have left. In North Korea, a defector is not just an emigrant. It is an active threat that is being hunted all over the world. Not because he knows military secrets, but because he lives by proving that there is an alternative. In some religious associations, and we will not name specific ones because the phenomenon is universal, a former member is declared an apostate and a dangerous person. He's not just excluded, he's demonized. The family is forbidden to communicate with him. Friends are advised to avoid. Why? Not because he's carrying heresy from the outside. It's because he lives nearby. He's familiar. He was a part of it, and his existence poses a question to everyone who remains. Why did I stay? It's unbearable. Therefore, it must be destroyed, at least reputationally. Now let's go beyond religion and take a broader look. This mechanism works wherever there's a system with a claim to the monopoly of truth. In politics, a party dissident is always more dangerous than an oppositionist. Gorbachev destroyed the USSR from within. It wasn't an external attack, it was heresy. And this is why he is still hated in Russia more than the American presidents who imposed sanctions. In science, a scientist who goes beyond the consensus of his discipline risks much more than an amateur journalist who criticizes science from the outside, because he knows the language, he knows the methodology. His objections cannot be dismissed with the phrase, "he just doesn't understand." In culture, a director or writer who grew up within a certain tradition and then criticizes it becomes persona non grata much faster than an external critic, because his words have weight. The pattern is the same. Betrayal is an ontological threat. It says not just "you're wrong," but "the right to be right is not absolute." And this is a deadly idea for any system of government. Think about it. Democracy is not afraid of dictators from outside. It is afraid of its citizens who have stopped believing in democracy. Capitalism is not afraid of socialism as an idea. It is afraid of former top managers who write that the system is rotten from the inside. Religion is not afraid of atheism. It is afraid of a theologian who has asked too many correct questions. And here I want to say something that might turn this whole conversation around. We talked about how systems are afraid of heretics because they show that there is a choice. An alternative is possible. The system is not absolute. But there's something we haven't said yet. A heretic is also dangerous because he is almost always right. Not in detail, not always in specific arguments, but the main thing is that the system is not the ultimate truth. He is almost always right. The history of mankind is not a history of orthodox victories. This is the story of the victorious heresies. Heliocentrism was a heresy. Evolution was a heresy. Women's rights were heresy. Democracy was a heresy. Anesthesia during operations was also heresy, because pain is God's plan. Every move forward started with someone saying, "Wait a minute, are you sure?" And almost every time, the system responded not with arguments, but with punishment. Because the system intuitively feels that if you give the heretic the floor, if you engage in an honest dialogue, it can lose. And this is not paranoia. These are statistics. The fear of a heretic is not a sign of the strength of the system. It's a sign of her vulnerability. The stronger the persecution, the weaker the arguments. The Inquisition would not burn people if it could win the debate. Totalitarian regimes would not put poets in prison if they were not afraid of poets. Corporations don't sue investigative journalists if they had a different answer. Rage is always proportional to the threat, and the threat is proportional to the rightness. The next time you see a system, any system, declaring someone a traitor, a heretic, an apostate, ask yourself one simple question. Not who's right, but what exactly did they say that made them so afraid? Because those who are afraid almost never say what it is. And this silence is an answer in itself.